The IBM Forms 4.0 Designer includes exciting new capabilities that simplify connecting web forms to back-end data sources and business functions through web services. I'm John Boyer, the Distinguished Engineer for IBM Forms, and in this video I'm going to show you some web services being used within a web form during the interaction experience. And then I'll show you how easy it is to hook up web services in the IBM Forms Designer so that your forms can take advantage of your enterprise service-oriented architecture. In this web browser, I've connected to a form that presents the online view of a user's bank accounts. This form might have been entered by clicking a link on the bank's main web page. To demonstrate web service calls to a server-side business rule system, we've hooked up one web service to the data entry completion of this client number field. So if I click into this field and I enter an invalid value and then hit enter or tab, the web service call invokes the backend business rule and finds out that the data is incorrect. I go back into this field and enter a correct data value and hit enter. The web service is actually called again, runs the backend business rule, and finds out that the data is now correct. This type of service allows you to leverage complex or proprietary business rule systems without having to build the business rules directly into the forms. There's another web service that's activated within this form by this search button. This style of web service allows us to be responsive to query style of results from a web service. So if I click this button, you'll see that an entire table has been grown. The web service actually returns XML data, and the form is automatically responsive to growing the user interface necessary to display those query results. However, the table contents themselves can also be more than just display only. In fact, each row of this table contains more interactive user interface that allows web service calls to populate an inner table for each row of the outer table. So when I click that checkbox, I'm actually getting the account details or transaction details for the checking account. If I scroll down a bit more, I can get a separate inner table on the next row of the outer table that gives me the transaction details for the completely different account. These types of updates are being done within the web page via AJAX calls, so there's no full page refreshes of the browser or the portal environment. So now I'm going to switch over to the IBM Forms Designer and show you how you'd hook these things up. So here I have a form that's already been started in the central design canvas, and I'm going to go over to the tool palette. I'll scroll down a bit to the web service tool, and I'll grab that and I'll drop that onto the form to start a web service wizard. Now, for all web services you can provide the WSDL file, but for a deployed web service it's very easy to ask the web service directly for the WSDL. So I'm just going to paste that URL in right now and hit next. The designer invokes the web service and asks for that WSDL file, reads the WSDL file, and obtains the various operations that are available from that WSDL. I'm going to choose the get accounts operation in this case. The last step of the main wizard allows me to optionally create the user interface elements. Now, in a normal form you have the option of mapping the web service inputs and outputs and the triggering mechanism onto existing form controls, but this demo form is a blank, so I'll just start by generating the user interface in this case. So now the user interface is going to be generated as well as the web service connectivity within this form. Now, before we go any further, what I'd like to do is show you that without any coding you already have a functioning web service within your form. And the way that I'm going to do that is this design canvas actually has a tab that allows us to go over to the runtime view of the form. So once I do that, you'll see that the form comes up, and at that point I can actually type the user input and then hit the go button, and you'll see that the form automatically updates with the results of the web service being presented. So now I'll go back over to the design canvas view and show you a little more about what's going on here. I'll expand the web services or the various forms drawers that are available here. Down below the main tool palette, you have a bunch of drawers that show various facets of the form, such as this outline view. There is a new drawer that shows you the web services view. We have the one web service connection that we've just created, and it's been expanded to show you all of the inputs and the outputs, as well as the triggers. I'm going to make this a bit bigger because we're in sort of demo mode here, so the screen's a bit smaller than normal. All right, and one thing you can see here is that as I click on these entries, the design canvas will actually show you what has been mapped to that web service input, or what has been mapped to that web service output, or if I scroll a little bit more, you can see the triggers. All right. If I highlight the trigger, it shows you that the button is what has to be pressed. This view is what allows you to actually drag and drop inputs or outputs or triggers onto pre-existing Forms elements rather than using the UI generation that I used at the start of this demonstration. Now, whether it's inputs or outputs or the triggers, the drag and drop mechanism is the same, so I'm going to demonstrate that to you by changing the trigger. So, for example, instead of triggering the web service based on a button press, say you'd like to trigger it based on the user completing the data entry in this field. All you have to do is click and drag onto the desired input element, and that creates a new trigger. Now that that's happened, I could leave both triggers in there, or we could actually get rid of the button, which we don't need anymore. So I'm just going to hit the delete key on that button, and of course the trigger. Now I'll go over to the view of the runtime view of the form and get that to update. And now if I type in the user input once again, and this time I'll hit enter on my keyboard, and you'll see the web service actually runs and updates the table with the results. This completes the demonstration of the capabilities of web services within IBM Forms, as well as the new design features. If you'd like to learn more about IBM Forms 4.0, come to our website where you can get more in-depth information, case studies, and free trial downloads. Thanks for watching.